We've learned yesterday that suddenly the foreign minister of Iran announced that the strait is open and commercial vessels can pass through the Strait of Hormuz. What he mentioned in that tweet, and then Donald Trump came out with a series of a lot of allegations in those. The Iran is capitulating. The outcome of what he was mentioning in those tweets is a total capitulation of Iran. And today we've learned that the strait is somehow closed, and or Iran is controlling the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Somehow it's limited. What is the current situation?
Well, you're right. We had an agreement with the Americans, a comprehensive ceasefire, what, 10, 11 days ago? What was it? And then the Netanyahu, if you recall, he carried out those carpet bombings on cities and slaughtering hundreds of people, even in neighborhoods that are not friendly to the resistance. He just, mass slaughter. And of course, Western media tried to portray it as targeting as Hezbollah strongholds and Hezbollah targets. I actually spoke to two Western journalists in Beirut. They wanted like a sound bite from me, or a sentence or two. Not a well, I don't know if it's called a sound bite, but a sentence or two from me for their reports. Why do you write stronghold? Or Hezbollah stronghold, or Hezbollah targets. These are all civilian targets, and both of them more or less said the same thing, that we didn't do this, our editors did them. I said, doesn't make a difference. Your name is on it, and you are, through your silence and your acceptance of this, you're complicit in these genocidal attacks. So Western media in Beirut and journalists are collaborating with it. We're collaborating with the Israeli regime. But the point is that Netanyahu violated the ceasefire. He wanted to wreck the ceasefire. So it's obvious from everyone across the world has to keep this in mind, that this war was started by the Israeli regime and the Trump regime, and the economic calamity that is heading our way is because of them. And so finally, 10, 11 days ago, whatever it was, we had an agreement. Lebanon was a part of it so that the slaughter would stop. And then Iran was to open the Strait of Hormuz. Lebanon, Netanyahu violated the agreement, so Iran didn't open the Strait of Hormuz. Also, when we went to Islamabad, it was clear that Vance did not have the authority to negotiate because he kept making phone calls. The Iranians had the authority, and it was Netanyahu who said Vance should the U.S. president reported to this tiny colony in Palestine, and he has said other American leaders report to him every day. So anyway, you think that would be a scandal, but so he didn't have the authority, and ultimately the United States didn't make any real progress with Iran at the negotiating table because the Israelis again didn't want this. So the continued crisis, the growing energy crisis that has continued over the last 10, 11 days is again because of Netanyahu. It is again because of the Zionists. We could have had an easing of the economic crisis by opening the Strait of Hormuz, but he violated the deal and he prevented the talks and in Islamabad from making progress. Then Iran, after the ceasefire, because Iran kept putting pressure on the Americans and kept the Strait of Hormuz closed in order to put pressure on the Americans to end this bloodshed in Lebanon. And 3 nights ago, I think it was supposed to happen. Netanyahu didn't do it. The next day, Iran made additional threats, including striking Israel or Israeli targets, Israeli regime targets, possibly in Lebanon. I'm not quite sure. But that, I think, tilted the balance along with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. And the regime accepted the ceasefire. Of course, it's violating it, but it accepted the ceasefire more or less. So Iran, yesterday, said that it will open the strait in accordance with the agreement with the United States last, 10, 11 days ago. But then, right after Iran opened the strait, Trump said the siege on Iranian ports will remain in place. He imposed the siege because Iran, uh, due to the violation of his ceasefire in Lebanon, they kept the strait closed, and then he imposed the siege. So because of Lebanon, the United States put a siege on Iran. And Vance apparently said, "Why is Iran so obsessed about Lebanon?" I didn't see it myself, but someone else told me, as if killing the Lebanese is not important. But Iran said, "No, we'll be steadfast." So the Americans imposed a siege on Iran, and then when Iran opened the strait, Trump said, "We're going to keep the siege on Iranian ports." Immediately, the Iranians went and said, "If that's the case, then the Strait of Hormuz remains closed." So Trump and Netanyahu started this global crisis. It is getting worse by the minute, literally by the minute, Nima. And reports say that within 1 to 2 weeks, experts are saying between 1 and 2 weeks, the situation is going to get very bad. And within 3 to 4 weeks, the global economy is going to head towards collapse. So this is where we are right now, thanks to these monsters. So the Iranians are, if the Americans right now decide to lift the siege on Iranian ports, and that means preventing food from getting in, preventing medicine from getting in. That's basically what it means. If they lift the siege, then the Strait of Hormuz will be open. So it's really up to the Americans whether there's going to be extra fuel, extra helium, extra oil, extra fertilizer on the global market, because right now there are huge numbers of ships in the Persian Gulf waiting for the green light to move.
Yeah. Professor Marandi, here is moments ago what Donald Trump said. He says that we have very good conversations going on with Iran and it's working out very well. But from what we've learned from the latest announcement, which was moment ago from the Supreme National Security Council, they said the basic is that the first point is that on the 10th day of the war, the United States started sending messages to Iranian. What is the process of negotiation or the talks or the messages that Donald Trump is somehow feeling that is going well?
Well, I think you know the answer to this, that nothing that Trump says you can take too seriously. Although, or seriously at all. Although I have a feeling, and I may be wrong, and I said this yesterday in a couple of places, and I also tweeted it, that maybe Trump is claiming that Iran has made all these concessions. It won't fund Hamas. It won't fund Hezbollah. It will, I don't know, give up its nuclear program. All those tweets that you were talking about earlier yesterday, all the nonsense that he said. Maybe he is saying all this so that later on he can say Iran made all these promises, but it did not carry out it did not fulfill those promises, so I have to attack Iran. That I think is because usually I ignore Trump. I don't read his stuff. I don't listen to his speeches. I've given up on that a long time ago because I learned nothing of it. Everything he says can be negated within an hour, after the subsequent paragraph, within a day. He flip flops. He changes. He lies a lot. So I usually ignore him. But yesterday, this sudden, these social media posts of his, one after another, I thought to myself that perhaps he's making these fake claims in order to be able to justify another attack later on, to say that, well, Iran agreed to all these things, but they didn't do it, so they were lying, and now I have to bomb them. That's, I think, a plausible interpretation. I'm not saying that's the right interpretation. It could just be then a continuation of all the nonsense that he says. Like you were just now saying, he's saying things are going well. I don't know. I can't really comment on Trump, but what I can say is that Nima, the whole war, sorry, the whole founded on a major calculation. The war was based on major to me.
I've lost your voice. Yeah.
Is it okay now?
You're back. Yeah. You said the whole world. What was that? And
I said what? Sorry, where was I cut off?
yeah, the whole war. From the whole war.
Yes, I think the whole war, not just this, the Ramadan war or the 40-day war, but also the 12-day war. Both were based upon miscalculations. The Americans thought, maybe through the lies provided to Trump by Israeli intelligence or by their own foolishness, the Americans thought that Iran would collapse. I'm sure you recall at the beginning of the 12-day war, or near the beginning, Trump said unconditional surrender. And then at the beginning of this war too, it was all about unconditional surrender. And then after a couple of days, when they saw that despite the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei and some of the senior commanders, the Iranian armed forces were functioning very well, and the people were on the streets, and there was no rush on banks or supermarkets or gas stations or anything like that. So for a few days, they kept saying Iran is running out of missiles. We've destroyed all their missile bases, their drone bases, and then they saw that no, this propaganda is not working. And after Iran continued to fire missiles and drones, and they gradually increased. So the Americans changed their position from unconditional surrender to providing this 15-point plan that Iran rejected. And then Iran gave its own 10-point plan, which Trump accepted. He accepted the 10-point plan to be the framework of the negotiations. That's why Iran accepted the ceasefire. And that was a huge victory. But of course, now Trump is, as the statement put out today by the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, Trump is trying not to is trying to impose other conditions that have nothing to do with the 10-point plan. So, but in any case, what I mean is that what I'm trying to say is that at the beginning of the war, the Americans said unconditional surrender. But after 10 days, it became clear to them that we're not going to lose this war. And even though they carried out more atrocities and they started targeting critical infrastructure, they failed. And so ultimately, they had to stop. And now we are where we are. But I think that we're heading for a war again. Now, I'm not sure. And some of my American friends say that Trump just wants out, perhaps. But I think that the chances for war are very high. And if there is war, it shouldn't take too long for it to start, because the Persian Gulf is going to get very warm. You live in the south of Iran. Your family is from the south. You know what I'm talking about better than I. During the Iran-Iraq War, I was in Khuzestan, the south, during summer, and it was very, very difficult, and during the day, almost impossible. So I think it's going to get warm. I think the Americans, if they want to launch an attack, they have to do it sooner rather than later. But the problem is that if the Americans launch an attack, they're going to target Iran's critical infrastructure again, like they did before. This time round, if Iran starts targeting, let's say, electricity in these regimes in the Persian Gulf, target in out of retaliation because they're part of the, and they are guilty. In the heat of in the summer, that will force everyone to leave. Millions of people will leave the Qatar and the Emirates and Kuwait and so on. Millions, literally overnight. They will not be able to stay because the heat will be intolerable, especially for these wealthy people who've been living off of oil and gas for decades. They won't be able to continue living there. So you'll see millions of people leaving literally overnight, and these regimes will collapse. So I think that to restart the war would be a catastrophic mistake for Trump, for the U.S. empire. I think it would probably bring an end to these regimes in the Persian Gulf, and it would definitely it would bring about that global economic collapse that we've been talking about, because we're heading in that direction. And the last 10, 11 days since the ceasefire, it's only been getting worse. Every day it's getting worse. And we're reaching closer and closer. We're getting closer and closer to the tipping point. As I said, 1 to 2 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. This is how they are interpreting how the future of the global economy will move. So we'll have to see. Again, there are differing views, but I think that not my understanding. I know that the Iranian armed forces have been preparing themselves 24 hours a day, and that just like after the 12-day war, they began preparing themselves for a bigger war, and this time they are preparing themselves for the next round.
From the announcement of this National Security Council, one of the points that is mentioned in the talks, it says new proposals have been raised by the Americans, which the Islamic Republic of Iran is considering and has not yet responded to. Professor Marandi, what was the fair, in order to talk with the American part, you have to understand, are they really prepared to talk, or they do want to somehow continue with this sort of because you don't see any sort of deep understanding of the root causes of what's going on. They want to put something, superficially. They want to solve the problem that is on the surface, not going below the surface, not those deep causes of the conflict. Do you see any sort of understanding in the American part to being willing to go in that direction?
Well, I'm not privy to what is going on right now. I don't know what the new American proposals are. The Pakistani delegation that left, I think, last night, they were here for 2-3 days in order to see what can be done. So right now, I'm not in a position to give a definitive response to your question. But what I can say is that is the nature of empire. The empire, it's like Zionists, they consider themselves Zionists or worse, but the empire considers itself to be exceptional. And so it has exceptional rights, it has exceptional privileges, and therefore for anyone to demand justice, for them, that's all outrageous. The 10-point Iranian plan, which people should take a look at, there's nothing extraordinary in it. It's a very normal 10-point plan, but the Americans don't want to take it seriously because for them, Iran as an equal doesn't make sense. When we went to Pakistan, while we were there, the Washington Post put out a opinion piece, and the Washington Post is very close to the CIA, that they should kill the negotiators. And so when we were coming back, we thought that there was a good chance that they would shoot down our plane, the Americans or the Israelis. This is the sort of regime, this is the sort of mentality that we're dealing with, where the media competes with the regime in promoting crimes against humanity and war crimes. So to get justice from the United States is you have to be firm and steadfast. We've seen how the Americans have been bullying countries across the world over or tariffs, and the only country that really stood up to the United States was China because of its power and strength. So I'm not very optimistic, but Nima, again, going back to the war, I think the Americans obviously have been preparing themselves for another round of war. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think there's a good possibility. The Americans and the Israelis have been preparing themselves. The Iranians are preparing themselves. So it could be that this period they've been buying time. But this, I think, is a miscalculation again for maybe four reasons. One is that Iran is also preparing itself. It's not as if the Iranian armed forces and the government are on vacation. So they are swiftly preparing themselves for the next phase. The second issue is that this ceasefire period, because of their own actions, because of refraining from carrying out the ceasefire in Lebanon, and now imposing a blockade on Iranian ports, they have caused the Strait of Hormuz to remain more or less closed. So the global economic crisis is intensifying. It's now it's even worse. This is the pay because now even Iranian ships are not going through. There's I've heard different stories about how many Iranian ships are getting through or not. It's not clear to me what exactly is happening if some ships are getting through or not. I've heard different stories. I don't know what's true. I'll try to figure that out later on. But in any case, it is getting worse than before. The pace, the movement towards the catastrophe, the global economic catastrophe, is speeding up. So this buying time is pushing the world and the United States, of course, towards a major crisis. And then the other issue is that the third issue is that, as I said earlier, we're heading towards the warmer season. It's going to get very hot in the south in a month, and then it will just become intolerable. So even if the Americans, and I think the Iranians will probably allow them to take some territory and then deal with them in the counterstrikes. So they'll let them, let's say, occupy some areas or maybe islands, and then they'll start hitting them with missiles and drones and harassing them day and night and taking casualties as the weather gets warm and hot and intolerable, which will be terrible for their morale. So I think that these three reasons, and then a fourth is that the world is getting sick and tired of the United States and the Israeli regime. Uh, Starting another war is going to cause greater anger, especially as we are getting very close to the economic crisis exploding. So I don't think what the United States is doing is smart at all. I think it is an act of desperation. But again, some people believe that the United States is not going to do this. But in the Supreme National Security Council statement that you alluded to, that just came out right before the show, it also says that Iran is going to take fees from the ships. So, and that they will remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz. This, I think, is a key turning point. This was the catastrophic mistake of the United States in this war and the Zionist regime. Because Iran had no ambition to take the Strait of Hormuz. We know that. And it was business as usual, even during sanctions. But now, under these circumstances, the Iranians have decided to take the strait and they're not going to give it back. And this changes the balance of power in this region permanently and in the world. So regardless of what the Americans do, the Iranians are not going to give up the Strait of Hormuz ever. And these dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, these family dictatorships, are going to have to deal with a new reality. And so I think that it's fair to say that the forces of empire across the region will be weakened, and the axis of resistance across the board, as a result, will be strengthened. And even if there's another war, I think that will not change anything. It will probably make it worse for the United States, because when they are defeated, and I'm sure when they if and when they start the war, that they will say, the Western media, even those who are opposed to Trump, will talk about their victories and how they've taken the islands and how heroic the U.S. soldiers are. But that propaganda will last a few days, just like the 12-day war and just like the Ramadan war or the 40-day war. After a few days, it becomes clear that this is not going to go well. This is not going to end well for the United States, and many in Iran, and we discussed this from the beginning of the war together, many in Iran want this war to continue. Not because they like war. No one likes war, but they're saying that we have to engage in combat with the Americans, with the Trump troops, in order that the United States in future never again thinks about attacking Iran.